Daredevil Born Again versus Superman, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. Which one is the best story? Okay, so a little bit of context for anybody new around here. This is a Batman channel, where I cover all the Batman comics and movies in chronological order. Last month I asked my viewers to give me suggestions for a special video to finish off 2020. The only condition was that the video could not be about Batman. A lot of suggestions came in and 3 stories were the most requested: Daredevil, Born Again, Superman, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, and X-Men, God Loves, Man Kills. I then made a poll so that people could choose only between those 3 options, and the results were difficult. Superman and Daredevil were tied with 45% of votes each. Then I made a second poll on Twitter with only those 2 options. I thought this would make things easy, but nope, it didn't. The results were again split in half. It was obvious that people were equally interested in both stories. That's when I had an idea. Instead of just choosing one story to make a video, what if I took both stories and made one big review to find out which one is the best story? This was the first time I read both stories, so this will also be a first impression review, and by the end of it, I will determine which story is superior: Daredevil Born Again or Superman, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. Let's find out. Before we start though, let me just remind you that my choices during this video are only my opinions, and everyone is free to agree or disagree with this video's conclusion. That said, I'll do my best to explain the reasons why I decided between one or the other. So let's begin with the first question. Which story has the better start? The interesting thing about this question, for me at least, is that the first act of both stories is extremely similar. Born Again is a 5-issue storyline, and the first 2 issues introduce the conflict of the story, where Matt Murdock is the victim of a systematic and calculated attack against him. Matt Murdock loses his job, his lawyer's license, his girlfriend, his friend and business partner, all of his money, and finally, his home is blown away in a massive explosion. All of this happened because the secret identity of Daredevil as Matt Murdock was exposed, allowing his enemies to get to him through his personal life. They bring him down, and after losing everything, a powerless Matt sheds tears of rage. Watching the hero like this makes for a very powerful first act, the hero completely broken and driven to tears. And that's exactly the same thing that happens to Superman. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow is a 2-part story, and the first issue contains all the first act, in which Superman is the victim of a systematic attack against him. The beginning of the story establishes that Superman has been dead for 10 years, and we get to see the final moments that led to his demise. We see how his most important enemies showed up, creating senseless chaos and unnecessary deaths. How they exposed Clark Kent as the secret identity of Superman, which allowed them to get to him through the most important people in his life. By the time Superman takes his friends to the Fortress of Solitude, things have taken a turn, from bad to worse. Everybody has this dreadful feeling that things are coming to an end, and after a very ominous and poignant farewell with a legion of superheroes, Superman sits down and cries. The similarities between these situations are uncanny, which makes this a really tough decision. Both are extremely well crafted, but the story with the best opening is Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. The first issues of both stories deal with the same concept, stripping down the hero and taking away all that matters from them, driving them to the point of tears. But the reasons behind those tears is what makes the difference. Matt Murdock cries after he has lost everything, and there is only one thing in his mind: revenge. Revenge against the man responsible for his loss. On the flip side, Superman cries not because he has lost everything, but because he is certain that his time has come. He knows deep inside that he is going to die, and this is the most human reaction to that circumstance. The sadness of Superman works as a reflection of what the reader is feeling at that moment. The beginning of both stories take the hero to their darkest places, but the beginning of the Superman story takes the reader along for the ride. Which story has better art? Comic books are a visual medium, therefore the art of a comic book is essential to tell a good story. The composition of the page and the panel layouts is what makes the difference between a regular story and an excellent one. Comic book art has evolved from basic narrative drawings to expressive sequential illustrations. When the art of a comic book complements the storytelling with mood and atmosphere, that's when you know it's excellent comic book art. And that's why in this case, the story that has the best art is Daredevil, Born Again. The art in Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow is by no means bad comic book art. On the contrary, the visuals of that story are quite dynamic and colorful. This is the image of Superman that most comic fans recognize, and that's largely because the artist of that story was Curt Swann. He is the quintessential Superman artist, having illustrated the Man of Steel for more than 30 years, starting all the way back in the late 1940s. That by itself is an impressive record. But at the same time, it's part of the reason why this art is no challenge for the modern approach of the art in Daredevil. The art of Curt Swann still has the artistic sensibilities of the classic Silver Age comics, which is very straightforward and narrative by nature. In contrast to that, there's the art of David Mazzucchelli in Born Again. From the very first panel of the story, the narrative is enhanced by expressive use of the graphics that provide atmosphere and mood to the story. The art in Born Again is not only telling you the story, it makes you feel the story, thanks to an excellent use of composition, layouts and lighting of the panels. The art in Man of Tomorrow is limited to illustrate what the script required, while the art in Born Again adds a layer of complexity and symbolism beyond the words of the script. Take for example the religious iconography used in all of the splash pages of the storyline, which are connected by the theme of a man who dies and is reborn. This just goes to show that a lot of thought went into the creation of these illustrations, delivering consistent and cohesive visuals that enhance the themes and concepts of the story, which is why, to me, Born Again has the best art, without contest. Next up, which story has the best characterization? Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow was an imaginary story intended to be the last adventure of Superman. The idea was to write a story to showcase the definitive ending to the Superman mythos and all of his supporting cast. The story delivered the final fate of all the important characters in the Superman universe: Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Lana Lang, Perry White, and Krypto. All of them show up and their personal stories come to an end. The problem is that the story is literally too short to give any of them proper characterizations. It feels as if most of them are just there because they had to be there, the only exceptions being Jimmy Olsen, Lana Lang, and Krypto. I mention them because they are the only ones to show a strong characterization when they sacrifice themselves to save Superman, and even that feels rushed, without giving us enough time to grieve their heroic actions. On the flip side, the supporting cast of Born Again are a vital part of the story, as nothing would have been possible without them. They are only a handful of characters, but they are so fleshed out and given proper conflicts that build up towards the central plot of the story. Take for example Ben Urich, the reporter who sides with Matt Murdock against Kingpin and plays an important role in Daredevil's return. Another example is Karen Page, Matt's former girlfriend, the person who sold his secret identity for drugs. The enemies in Man of Tomorrow suffer from the same problem as the supporting cast. Too many enemies show up, including Lex Luthor, Brainiac, Toyman, Prankster, and Metallo, and none of them are given proper motivations or character development, other than being evil in an effort to destroy Superman. On the other hand, Born Again has the Kingpin as the main antagonist, and for the best part of the story, he is the best written character, even more so than Daredevil. Kingpin is the driving force of the story. He is the exact opposite of Matt Murdock. He is evil personified. Kingpin pushes the hero to his limits, which makes the final victory that much more rewarding. Even though Superman and Daredevil are greatly and equally developed in their respective stories, the deciding factor in this question is on the characterization of the allies and enemies, and that's why I can safely say that Born Again is the best written story when it comes to characterization. Time for the next question. Which story is the most accessible? By this I mean which story is more friendly towards first-time readers. Comic books have this reputation for being too difficult to get into. Decades of continuity and extremely long-running series are the most common reasons why people can't just start reading any comic. And this is a problem with the Superman story. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow was published in 2 issues, Superman number 423 and Action Comics 583. Those are 1,000 issues worth of continuity and stories combined. At first glance, it is an extremely daunting task, and once you start reading, your fears are realized. There are too many references, characters, and situations that you don't understand. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow relies on the fact that all readers know about the history and continuity of Superman, throwing names and characters relentlessly at the reader. For someone who knows the Superman mythos really well, this is not an issue, and rather it's one of the best parts of the story. But for a new reader with no prior knowledge about Superman's world, this could be really jarring. And that's why the most accessible story is definitely Born Again. We are also introduced to many characters, references and situations for the first time, but Born Again does an extremely good job of explaining exactly all we need to know in order to understand all these elements. Having prior knowledge of all these things is nice, but it's not required as things become clear as the story progresses, which is something that doesn't happen in The Man of Tomorrow. I definitely think that Born Again does a great job of getting new readers interested in the world of Daredevil, while The Man of Tomorrow is more of a farewell to all of the fans of the pre-crisis Superman. Which leads me to the next question. Which story is more meaningful? This question has 3 parts, as we have to consider the impact these stories had among the readers, the creative teams involved, and the legacy of the characters. For the readers, Born Again meant a new chapter in the history of Daredevil, one that opened the door to many new possibilities in a story that defined the values of the character. Then there's The Man of Tomorrow, which offered the readers something that is ultimately rare in comic books, the definitive final story of a superhero, which is something so unique that has not happened again. Daredevil's history has continued with a multitude of new stories, TV shows and movies, all of which have drawn inspiration from Born Again, which is a testament to the enduring legacy of that story. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow hasn't done that for Superman, but that's mostly because it wasn't intended to do it. This was the last chapter of the pre-crisis Superman, the end of the legacy, and that's exactly what makes it so iconic. In all honesty, this is the toughest decision of the entire video, because both stories have proved to be extremely meaningful for the characters and the readers. However, in order to reach a decision, we have to take a look at how meaningful they were for the creative teams involved. Born Again was written by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli, and the instant success of the series made the two of them household names in the comic book industry. It literally opened the door so that they could work on larger, more iconic stories, like The Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One. Born Again boosted the careers of Miller and Mazzucchelli, giving them a great future career in comics. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow was written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Swann, which is a strange combination. Alan Moore was an upcoming writer, who was slowly becoming one of the best in the medium. This story certainly helped him get attention and gain notoriety among his peers, and allowed him to work on larger, more iconic projects, namely Watchmen, which is still considered one of the best comic books ever created. Then there's Swann, the quintessential Superman artist. He defined the looks of the character for more than 3 decades, and this was his last story illustrating Superman. However, he was not the only creator to say goodbye. Legendary DC editor Julius Schwartz had worked as the editor of Superman for 15 years, and he was responsible for coming up with the idea for this story. Schwartz and his longtime collaborator E. Nelson Bridwell also say goodbye to their legacy in the Superman comics, in the most touching fashion. Julius Schwartz is featured in the cover of the story, waving goodbye to Superman, along with his friends at the Daily Planet. And in the original publication, DC printed a 2-page summary of the most important events in the history of the Superman comics. This was written by E. Nelson Bridwell, who was known for his encyclopedic knowledge of Superman. These 2 pages show the love and dedication these people had to the character of Superman, and it's a poignant farewell to the team that had done so much for the character. I guess that what I'm trying to say is that While any creative team can produce stories that kickstart or boost their careers, it is very rare that a consistent creative team gets the opportunity to say their final goodbye to the fans, to the characters they gave life to, and also to their extensive careers. In that sense, the most meaningful story is whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. Whew. Now that that's out of the way, let's do something a little easier. Which story has the better ending? What I find most interesting about this is how two stories that have a very similar start can reach two very different endings. The ending of Born Again is all about Matt coming back from the brink of death, recovering his sense of identity and his conviction to keep fighting. The aftermath of the whole story deals with Matt starting a new chapter in his life, while still going strong as Daredevil. This ending is the complete opposite of the Superman story. Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow ends when Superman comes to terms with the fact that his time has come, that it's time to put an end to his life and career as the Man of Steel. He walks into a proverbial sunset, never to be seen again. Although that was the end of Superman, the man lived on happily for the next 10 years, without superpowers, without supervillains, and started a family with a woman he always loved, under a new identity. Both are happy endings, but at the core, they are different. Daredevil chooses to keep going, to keep fighting, to never give up. Superman chooses to let go, to make a change, not because he has given up, but because he understands that things need to change in order to keep moving forward. And that is why I think the winner of this section is whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. On a symbolic level, the ending of Born Again is the idealized version of superheroes, these icons that never give up and inspire us to keep going against all odds. As humans, we like the idea of things going on forever, and Born Again reinforces that idea. But the truth is that nothing lasts forever. Things change and things end. Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow is a symbolic representation of that fundamental law of nature, and even though many more Superman stories have been created since then, this one will forever mark the end of an era. All this leads us to the last question. Which story is the most memorable? This is perhaps the toughest decision of this whole video. Both stories are incredibly important, not only for the characters of each, but also for the comic book industry. We're talking about stories that were published in 1986, and that more than 30 years later, they're still among the most important stories ever created. Born Again is the definitive Daredevil story, as it defined the true character of Daredevil and has informed every important Daredevil story that has been created since then. The character became a household name, and it's all thanks to Born Again. Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow is the final chapter of a 47 years legacy, the conclusion to one of the most important characters in pop culture, and rightfully, one of the finest Superman stories ever created. Keeping in mind the great achievements of both, I ask myself, which is the most memorable story? Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow is. Now, hear me out. I think Born Again is a fascinating story with many complex themes, character development and expressive art, which has endured the test of time. Even by today's standard, this story is as fresh and relevant as it was back then, which is the first sign of a great masterpiece. But whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow is an emotional experience by itself. I was thrilled and captivated by a story that made me feel sadness and joy, and that after I was done reading it, I had to take a moment to reflect on the absolute genius of that story. In the end, Born Again felt like it was not really a Daredevil story, but more of a character study of Matt Murdock and the Kingpin. The pacing was a bit off at moments, dragging the story longer than it should have been, and overall it wasn't a satisfying experience for me. Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, on the other hand, is absolutely and without a doubt a Superman story. In only 2 issues, it captures the heart and soul of Superman, delivering one of the most heartfelt and genuine stories that I will never forget. Over the course of this video I tried to explain myself as best as I could on how I reached these conclusions. My general thoughts about these stories is that both stories have their flaws. They are by no means perfect. Considering that, I genuinely think that Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow is a better story. But I know that some of you will prefer Born Again, or maybe you love them both equally. Whatever your position may be should be the only thing that matters to you. And with that said, I hope you found this video entertaining and that you had fun. That'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.